I'm Nicolas Doucet. I'm the game director of Astrobot.
Which won Game of the Year last night. Congratulations!
What is this?
I told you
Thank
there
you
was going to
so
be a
much.
cake. I told you. Congratulations to you.
Thank you
team.
so much. That's
I
on camera
cannot
too?
believe
Yeah.
excited
Oh
you
my
are.
God, wow.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Wow. If you think about purely PlayStation, what's the first game that you go to work on? I mean, what were you doing on that game?
So, the first game we ever made with and for Sony was the Sly series. So, the original Sly Cooper was
Sly
the first
Raccoon.
time. Sly Raccoon in Europe, yes, much to our chagrin. So we had just finished. We did our first game on the N64, this rocket game. It's kind of small, and we were really excited. I mean, unbelievably excited that we had the chance, based on that, to sign Sly with Sony. We were super, super excited. And, you think everything's going to be great. But then, we have to get the dev kits. We have to learn to program. This is the PlayStation 2. It's not the easiest hardware to extract. And so, that was really our trial by fire. We had shipped a game, but this was a first big, chance. You're with a console manufacturer. You're making a platformer, something I know you love too. And, that process of really being taught by our, the production staff at Sony, Grady Hunt, Connie, Shu, these people really mentored us during this period. And there were times when we were one milestone away from, this just isn't going to work. You're just not making enough progress.
Wow.
And we had a lot to learn. But that game was, if you had the curve of our learning to make games, that was the steepest part. We had the most to learn. They had the most to teach, and the schedules were really short back then. I think it was maybe a 2-year project to go from barely understanding how to run our company to shipping the game with Sony all in a 2-year period was crazy.
I have a question about, you're working on a game that is like, large scale. There's a lot to balance, a lot of considerations. What's the hardest creative challenge that you have, or maybe several,
It depends on sort of the scale, and actually scale is one of the biggest problems. We're not a huge team. We're always worried about just how big can we make this game and how are we going to manage that. But I think the biggest creative challenge, which isn't a scale challenge, the biggest creative challenge that we really faced on Ghost almost really predates Ghost. I know some of the trials and tribulations that we had. The game that we thought we were making initially wasn't Ghost, and we began working on that game, and then that game wasn't going very well, and so we kind of we went to Sony and said, hey, nothing is going well, and we started another one, and that one also didn't go super well. And I think both of those failed because we didn't have an incredibly clear character fantasy. And then
you mean there was too much fantasy in it? You had to explain the world?
Yeah, it was like a guy who was the heir to the throne who discovers magic, and like, what am I? Like, I'm a vigilante magician? What is that? Like, but if I told you get to be a samurai in feudal Japan during the Mongol invasion, exactly what it is. And so it took us a long time, years of time, to kind of iterate on big cycle iteration, very different games, to finally realize that we had to get this right. And once we found that, then it really felt like creatively we were hugely unleashed at that moment. So I think that was probably our answer. I don't know. Like, you guys have such a different creative problem.
But when I hear your story, like I feel like that's really like a proof that simplicity goes a long way, right?
Yes.
Because we are our worst enemies, I often feel, as game developers, because we love technology, we love all these things that can be overly complicated.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times in the production of Astrobot where this idea of just like all these requests, and how about we add another button, just because we're stuck on one thing,
Yeah.
Adding another button would become, so with triangle or circle, now you can do this action or this action. And that's like very, very, it's the easiest thing to do.
Yes.
But it needs to be resisted, because the price you'll pay down the line, for the clarity and the simplicity will be so great that we had better challenge ourselves to try and fit, or maybe even like leave aside this extra function we wanted to put in the game, or fit it in a way that is less cumbersome, if you like.
Yes.
It's something that we decided from the get-go. We're going to invest in variety over maybe like single depth. We're not going to have one mechanic that has like a skill tree.
Yes.
We're going to have 20 mechanics that have a single entry and single
Which is perfect for a game where you might be trading the controller.
That's it. Yeah.
Where you might have, a game that you might dip in and dip out at different times. It's so important to introduce new mechanics through time, because it re-levels all your players back to, a new mechanic. Nobody knows how to play it. And so then they all start down the learning curve again. And you guys reset that constantly, which I think makes it very accommodating to new players. I think it's a brilliant part of your design. I'm curious how you guys deal with like difficulty, and how you deal with some of the tension that you want and need in a game, but not maybe breaking it. I mean, there's games, especially now, there's lots of games that really difficulty is an important part of it.
Yeah.
How do you guys think about putting difficulty into a game like Astro?
It's really interesting. You're right, there's a lot of games that are really, really difficult these days, and we come from a background long time ago of games that were very, very difficult too, right? So I think for us, it's almost like we don't think about difficulty, we attack it from the other angle. You're playing video games to have a good time and to relax. You're running around, you're jumping around, you're climbing on something, you're riding an animal, anything that you do like that, the interaction itself gives you pleasure.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be difficult. It has nothing to do with difficulty. It's to do with pure satisfaction. So in Astro, actually, we have that. You crash in the desert, and the PS5 is like stuck in the sand, and we have this area, and there is a satellite you have to go and get.
Yes.
But and you have to go and learn and climb. But before that, we put a big area of the sand.
Yes.
For you to run around, and the goal, and for us, is that we want people to get lost in it.
Yeah.
And spend 20 minutes in there before they go and activate the first thing. Just because running on that sand, sliding on that sand, chasing the little fennec, and whatever is fun, and you get stuck into these kind of little toy loops.
Yeah.
And I think if you get those right, 80% of your game holds itself together really, really well, and then it's about kind of adding these moments of kind of thrill.
Interesting.
Where, that's which is why we really treat the game as a toy.
Yeah, I believe that. It's funny, I thought of that area as being an onboarding for people who'd had no experience with a controller.
As well.
Right.
But it's for both.
Yeah.
It should also be fun for people who just enjoy, because we also put some tech in there, right?
Yeah.
When you go and slide in the sand, the decals we put and the marks in the sand.
Sure, of course.
We try to kind of get close to something like Journey did, right? Just that should be something that is even has some wow factor for even quite a seasoned gamer.
Yes, something that you recognize.
Yeah.
And that's a huge part of what you guys do. Yeah, it's funny because
What about you?
In Ghost, like, you're going to duel a master swordsman or whatever, and that has to be difficult.
Yeah.
Like, and so, we will clearly insert difficulty checks as part of, I think, what people want out of that experience. But in general, if you look back at Sly, Infamous, and the Ghost series, we really want people to complete the game.
Yeah.
I feel like they paid us, $40, $50, $60, $70, and to put in parts of the game that they cannot get through feels crazy to me. I mean, like, the amount of, even when I look at the statistics on the percentage of players who bounce out of games and don't finish them, it makes me sad. I feel like, oh my God, why would we make it so difficult? So there's real value, I think, in being very, very careful about how difficulty is used in the experience, and ways that players, providing different ways, whether it's, with different weapons or power-ups or charms or whatever we can do to give you a little help around those if you need it. I think that combination is really important to get right in a game like ours where mastery is a big part of it,
Yeah.
and we still want you to finish.
But you guys kind of managed to get this good balance of relaxation, challenge, and especially size. I hope anyway that your next games have that same kind of philosophy. At the same time, during this era of PlayStation 2, from my eyes, because I was in Europe at the time, there was this interesting triangle where you had Insomniac doing Ratchet and Clank,
Yes.
Naughty Dog doing Jak and Daxter at that time, and you guys doing Sly.
Right.
And there was something kind of similar in terms of just like, cartoon, action, adventure, platformy.
Absolutely.
And it felt like, did you guys kind of do that in unison? Did you talk to each other when these?
So we have always, I think it's kind of part of our identity, is that the Naughty Dog and Insomniac were always these, Crash Bandicoot and Spyro were these amazing games.
True, they started earlier.
They were much earlier. They had well-established, super long relationships with Sony, amazing, successful games. So we always felt like the runt of the litter. We were the small, and so we did not spend a lot of time talking to them. We were almost too intimidated to talk to them. So
I know the feeling.
Yeah, sure. After you win Game of the Year, you know the feeling. But we were pretty cautious about those, and we always felt like we were trying to catch up to our older siblings.
No, but I understand that very much. When you're looking up to these well-established teams,
Absolutely.
and you feel like
I don't know if I ever felt like you look at the Naughty Dog games.
part of that club.
Yeah, you always feel a little bit like, oh, maybe some little parts of what we do are pretty good, but you always feel intimidated by those other teams, even today.
It's good, but that's part of humility, and probably like because you love video games so much that you respect those who perfect it.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's the collective power that really makes you realize, like, this company really has like something special. And so to me, that's the biggest strength. Is really that it sounds a bit like cheesy, like the family and stuff, but it's true. Like at least it's a network of people that have a shared passion for sure. So Astrobot has all these cameos, and of course you guys and your games, you were high on the list of the games we wanted to represent. And I remember we of course this Sly was one of the one that really fits the style as well, because it's a cartoon character to begin with, an animal, so it's kind of that was like one that we had a good idea for. And then it was Infamous we had 3 characters, with Cole and Abigail and Delsin. Yeah. And then there was, of course, Jin. And actually, Jin Sakai is one of the first one that was concepted inside, the onsen. Yeah. With his animation, and when you hit him, he just gets up. It's one of the rare animations that we do with everything is speed up to the max. Yes. He dresses up really fast and gets ready. Soda, and he's like, there's kind of something a bit manic and crazy about it. So we had this. I don't know if you remember, I turned up with videos of this. Yeah. We happened to meet at one of the seminars, summits that we had at PlayStation. And we literally sat down at the corner of a table, we opened the laptop, and you gave me feedback there and then on each one of them, and I was just making notes. Yeah. And I love working on that, because first I was really in admiration that your games by heart. Like on the back of your hand. I know it sounds, but it's easy to forget or to be disconnected. But I was really impressed by how you remembered every detail, because you told me about the fire, like when he does his special attack, it comes down. That's orange, but it needs to be a bit more red or something like that. And that's like, okay, really very specific, right? I
mean, it's such. I remember feeling so grateful that you guys were the ones doing it, and that you not just knew the characters, but treated them with such joy. You really appreciated them for what they are. So it was awesome.
What kind of like recurrent kind of comments do you have about your game, especially I guess Ghost of Tsushima? Is there like one thing that really sticks out?
Yeah, there's one singular moment in that game, which actually we figured out pretty late into the development, which is the moment where you've played through most of the intro, and then we put you on your horse and you're running through the forest, and we very cleverly sort of hand the control off to you, and you might not realize that you have control, but you do. And then as you ride through, there's a clearing, and then the game opens up, and the music is timed, and the lighting is timed, and the VFX are set up, all to kind of give you this huge sense of freedom. And then the logo hits.
Exactly what you mean.
I've seen that 100 times, and I still could not explain to you why it's as effective as it is. But the magic of the incredible talent of the artists and the musicians and the animators and the programmers who figured out how to make the controls work, it just all came together there.
Great. See, to your point earlier about the strength of PlayStation and the So okay. So regarding the game you're currently working on, so Ghost of Tsushima,
Sure.
how much do you carry that knowledge and those lessons from the previous games? How much is that changing the way you approach things?
I think of it, we talk about this at work as a staircase, that our careers and our company games are a staircase, and that each game is really building off of the work we did from the previous games. And we talk about, like, you want to continue to really push creatively, technically, as storytellers, as artists, you want to continue to push. We really thought about where could we go, what IP could we make that was in space. It wasn't the same thing everybody else was doing, but still really was a progression from where we had been. Because if we went off and tried to make a football game, we would be terrible at that.
Mm-hmm. I totally get that point you're saying about, like, looking for a spot that is like empty and where you can shine, even if it's not necessarily the most popular one.
Oh yeah.
It's not the premium beach, but the premium beach, is really crowded. You go to the secondary beach, you have to walk a little bit more. It's a bit more like, it hasn't got all the bars, but it has some nice bits of sound that are really clear, and you're gonna spend a great time there, right?
Yeah. That's that again. We've talked. I think what you're saying is 100% correct. That you want to make sure that you're choosing where you're going to go, and that recurses, right? There are everybody. When we were starting at Sly, everybody was making beautiful cutscenes and animation, and their cutscenes looked gorgeous. And then you'd go to their game, and it was it was a PS2 game. It didn't look as good as the cutscenes. And so we said, well, what if we do the opposite? How do we create a thing where maybe the cutscenes are very graphic, and then when we go from that, we fade to 3D in the game, and then the game's more, and so like, how can you take the conceits or what's popular and say, let's find ways to not chase that, but to learn from that and say, where can we use that to create distance? So, when we did Ghosts, there were not a lot of games in this period in Japan at the time. It's gotten more popular, and that's kind of the zeitgeist. It's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
But we're always going to look for a way to find our own little space.
Yeah.
For a game like Astro that is so many influences. I mean, like, it's almost like a memory lane type game. Like, where do you, not the IPs that you're putting in, but where do you find inspiration for the team, maybe at a macro level, or as game makers outside of games? You guys have so much game inspiration. I'm curious, beyond that, what you go to.
Well, because it's a game that we treat like a toy. For us, it's really important to think about all these kind of like fundamental games that you play as a kid. I'm talking about, like, hide and seek, like these kind of things, like, what's the time, Mr. Wolf? I don't know, in how you call that one, where you counting at the wall and you turn around when people are moving. They're moving here. Anyway.
Closer to red light, green light.
Yeah, red, white, and green light. Yeah, it's so many ways. So these kind of things are really good inspirations because they're super universal.
Yeah, that's
usually don't have to explain them too much, and they tap into nostalgia as well to some people, and they have a fundamental play value, which that's why they became, what they became.
Of course.
Like, So looking into that is always good. We also look into movies a lot, and especially like if you have a level that feels a bit like a famous like Jurassic Park kind of thing, or or if you have something that is more kind of adventure, it's easier to ground a scenario or a kind of location if you're talking to a lot of people about something that is like familiar to them. So for us, familiarity is really important. we put familiarity down, and then on top of that we try to surprise people. But I think if you play 100% the card of surprise, sometimes you become too abstract, and for audience it can be really off-putting. It's like, well, to connect.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for us, I mean, the biggest influence, and I'm talking about for the whole totality of the company, has always been genre pictures, and I don't know, it speaks to what we love. And so the Sly series was always just heist movies. There's sequences in the very beginning of Sly that are
really?
dropping down the elevator shaft with the lasers straight out of a. Of course, Infamous is inspired by comics and superhero movies.
Yeah, and Infamous came out at the time about Heroes was going on TV. It was like,
I forget the exact timing, but certainly that was going on.
Yeah. That was a coincidence?
It was a coincidence, but I mean, superheroes had this huge moment around then, and we were, our art team was very passionate about, the team we'd built to make Sly had a lot of comic, art fans, superhero fans, and so it was pretty natural. A lot of our new title ideation in that period was around, could we do a superhero-based piece of content? And then, of course, Kurosawa and Miike for the genre pictures, again, of samurai movies. So I think all three of our generations really came cinema first, more than anything.
Well, that's interesting you say that. So I want to have that conversation because I remember having that chat with my brother. He plays all your games as well, and it was years ago, and we said, Sucker Punch, they really, really have a thing about gameplay and reactivity.
Very much.
But then you just said like movie, it could be misinterpreted. When you say like movies is movies first, you could say, well, then it's interactive movies.
Yeah.
But it's not. You guys put the gameplay at the heart.
It's a great point.
Yeah.
And that, like, I think in the macro, yes, we're inspired by the settings and the presentation of those movies, but at our core, I think the thing that we love is the feel of the character in your hand. The expression we used to use is that you want the awkward piece of plastic in your hands, you want that to disappear. And I think it's one of the things that I bet if we sat and talked about the micro that our two teams share the most closely is that passion for the way that the feel of the moment is. And when I play Astro, the way you use haptics as I transition across surfaces, and the sensory experience of playing the game.
I know exactly what you mean.
It's so important.
It's hard to put words on that, but we all know what it is.
Yes, and I love that about the Astro games. I think it's, as much as I like they're incredibly joyful and they have these amazing nostalgic moments, the part that is irreplaceable to me is the way it feels, and I think we cherish that in our games too. What do you worry about in our business? Like, what makes you scared?
I am sometimes surprised by the conflict there is between a requirement or a need for more novelty, and yet at the same time, when novelty really comes out, we need to go out of our way to find it, and the indie scene is full of it. Then we are too lazy to actually do that as consumers. That kind of worries me a little bit, and it's beyond video games. I think to me it's more like just humanity as a whole. I think the world is making human beings more and more lazy about anything in general. I'm raising kids as well, and I can see that their habits and how difficult it is to just get to do like simple tasks that are just actually survival tasks. Like if they don't learn how to do, and no one's gonna come and do for them. We need to bring some sense and some back.
I think I worry as much about the bigness of games as anything, and I don't just mean like, the map of our game is big, but like the commitment to games, like you think about how big is a movie as an impact on a player, or on a viewer, and it might be 2 to 3 hours, and a book might take a dozen hours to get through a book. But now you have games that people play for years and years and years and years, and I think that as game makers, I really want to do new experiences, and if people's time gets taken up increasingly by huge games that straddle years and years of players' time, I feel like that it makes it harder for not just us, but for other people to have their say in the conversation about what kind of games could be. And maybe that's why the indie games are more buried.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like, what if somebody who was, you know, trying to get started in the industry came to you for advice? Like, what do you tell them? It must happen.
Okay, so I think one of them is just to be bold, and you know, I did some things to. I told you the thing about Shuhei.
Yeah.
When I came to Japan, I sent him an email. He replied in 4 hours, and then he replied CCing all the people that had skipped. And I'm just saying, like, you know, don't do that. Don't. I'm not saying that we should skip. You know, you should skip your boss, anything like that. But these kind of like crazy moments where, in order to get something done, you have to sort of almost like bend the rules. I think there's a little bit of that needed, and you know, you need to gauge as you know, the right amount, because if you just play just by the book that has been decided for you, it's hard. You've got to find a way to make yourself stick out of the crowd.
Interesting.
To your point earlier, you know, about finding that spot where no one is, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of hard work, because I mean, there's no secret, right? You have to work really, really hard to get anything.
But I think even your process says another really important thing, which is something that I think we really believe, which is, first of all, make things. Like, the way you will get good at this is to make things. But equally important is have people who, you know, are not here to tell you how great you are, have them play it and tell you what they think. Because you can't judge your own work. And so it's super important that you get used to that creative loop of, I made a thing, play it, I want you to be the person who will tell me this isn't working. Like, I need that.
It's very humble, very difficult.
It's incredibly important though. And, you know, just that creative iteration and the only way to make some, you know, I always think of, nobody thinks that they could go and suddenly go from nothing and become a great basketball player, right? You won't go from nothing and become a great video game maker. You have to miss a lot of shots. You have to be willing to do that. And the sooner you get to it, the better. Like, start making shots.